Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good to see you all.
Good morning, Christine. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good morning from CAPS.
Hello, Caps. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Carrie. See you both. Good morning. Good morning. So we have about 45 people registered this morning. So we're at 23 right now. So we'll just give people maybe 1 or 2 more minutes to join, and then we will get going. All right, so we have a good amount to cover today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started just to make sure that we can get everything in that we want to talk with you all about. So let me officially welcome you all to the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program 2023 Grantee Manual Session 2. This session is the second in a 3-part series. So we are going to be going over the next 5 sections of the Grantee Manual, picking up after our last Grantee Manual Session 1. Just as a reminder, the target audience for this session are program administrators, program managers, program coordinators, outreach and recruitment coordinators, wraparound service coordinators, student support service coordinators, and transition service coordinators. So we're really going to be talking about how to deliver this program. So everyone's kind of should be here for this program. My name is Christine Flynn. I am a grant manager with the Office of Illinois Works. And today I am joined by my whole team. So I'm going to have them each introduce themselves, beginning with Deputy Director Norman Ruano.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to spending some time with you and answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Norman. Next up, we have Dr. Gia Suggs, who will also be presenting today.
Everyone, welcome. It's great to see all of you all again.
We are also joined by my fellow grant manager, Dan Martinez. If you could say hi.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
And last but not least, Dr. Vera Lee is also here with us.
Welcome back, everybody. Good morning.
Thank you all. So let's delve into our course description. So the Illinois Works program was created as a result of Governor Pritzker's historic $45 billion capital plan and his commitment to expanding equity in the Illinois construction workforce. As an Illinois Works grantee, you are now a part of this exciting new initiative that will create opportunities for Illinois businesses, communities, and families. Just as a reminder, the Illinois Works program is actually composed of 3 key programs. The first program in the line, and also the first one that was implemented, is the Apprenticeship Initiative. The second program is the Pre-Apprenticeship Program that we're all here to learn about today. And finally, the Bid Credit Program, which will debut later this year. This training is the second of the 3-part series that reviews each section of the 2023 Grantee Manual to ensure that you all can effectively implement your pre-apprenticeship program. And during this webinar, we will cover, as I said earlier, the next 5 sections of the Grantee Manual. If you have not yet accessed the Grantee Manual, we are going to place the link to the manual in the chat now. Like I said a little bit earlier, we're going to be covering a lot today. So if you would like to follow along in the Grantee Manual, I encourage that, or feel free to take notes as we go through. Today we are going to be covering, as I said, 5 sections. So the first is section 4, which is outreach and recruitment. Section 5, which is program application and intake. Section 6, which is the participant wraparound services and student support services. Section 7, which is training, instruction, and certifications. And Section 8, which is program completion, transition services, and follow-up. So by the end of this training, after going through those sections, all of you will be able to identify outreach and recruitment tools and methods, respond to leads based on their category, apply eligibility criteria, support potential participants through the program application process, complete an intake process, provide wraparound services, provide student support services, comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements, implement a comprehensive program orientation, create a comprehensive curriculum based on experiential learning, incorporate a Kirkpatrick Level 1 evaluation, provide transition services, and engage in follow-up activities. So, like I said, there's going to be a lot we cover in this session today. If you are taking notes, great. But if you happen to miss something, don't fret. This will be recorded and it will be placed on the Illinois Works Partner Guide, along with all of our other webinar recordings. Please expect that within the next about 48 business hours. So before we move on, are there any questions before we start? Barely, do we have any questions in the chat at this point?
No questions at this point, Christine.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on to our next section and we'll learn a little bit about who's in the room today, but also identify what you all hope to learn from this training. So we are going to be utilizing Mentimeter again today. This is our favorite tool for engagement. So if you can please go ahead and sign in to Mentimeter right now. You can go to www.menti.com and then you will enter the code 61748324. Dan has also provided that information in the chat, along with a link that will take you directly to our Mentimeter questions. So I'll just give everyone a couple of seconds to get over there, make sure we're all ready to answer our first questions here. All right. So let's head over to Mentimeter. I want to learn a little bit about who is in the room today. So in Mentimeter, if you can put your name, and if you attended session 1, Grantee Manual session 1, put an asterisk next to your name. Also provide your organization, your role, and your geographic location. So again, if you can put your name and then put an asterisk next to your name if you attended that first session. All right, so Tiara, DeEva, Daniel Mendez from EDDR Foundation, Marita from Project Hood, Community Assistance Programs. Let's see, Alejandro from St. Augustine, Adam from Richland Community College. All right, great. I'm seeing a lot of names I've seen before and some names that are new to me. So I'm glad to welcome you all. Alicia from Associated Builders and Contractors. Also Carrie from Associated Builders and Contractors. Calvina from CAPS. Ashley from Rincon. Angela from EDDR Foundation. Sandra B. Thank you guys all so much. So it seems like a lot of you have attended our sessions before, so I welcome you back. Thank you so much for joining again. Please feel free to continue to put your information in there just so we kind of have an idea of who was able to attend today. Let's see, we also have William and Latanya, Natasha. Great. Well, thank you all so much. So we are actually going to stay in Mentimeter. And I just want to kind of set expectations for today. Just make sure that we all have an idea of what we're going to be learning today. So go ahead, stay in Mentimeter, and we're going to answer our next question, which is there anything in particular you are hoping that we cover today? So anything you're hoping we review during the session today?
It's for the everyone who is great at it.
All right. Anything that you are looking forward to learning the processes, wraparound services. Absolutely, we'll talk about those today. Best practices for recruiting and data collection. We'll definitely talk about recruiting. We will talk a little bit about data collection, but Grantee Manual Session 3 will actually really heavily talk about data collection along with our IWRS sessions. So let's see, IWRS. So we do have some upcoming sessions that are really going to delve into IWRS. So we'll touch on it today, but we won't be too deep into that today. Recruiting, the process transitions in recruiting, absolutely. Wraparound services, we'll talk about best practices and expectations for outreach and recruitment. Okay, great, absolutely. So definitely outreach and recruitment, something we're going to talk about. We'll talk about transitions. We will touch on a little bit of ATS and IWRS, but we will have actually technical trainings for both of those. So we'll really delve into those a little bit deeper in those specific trainings in the next couple of weeks here. But it seems like there's a lot of focus on transitions and recruiting, which is great because we definitely will talk about those today. So thank you all so much for adding that there. I think we're on the same page of what we're going to be reviewing today. So let's go ahead and move on to our next slide here. Because, as with all of our training sessions, at the end of each section, you are going to have time to ask questions. So you can always feel free to put a question in the chat or to unmute yourself. But you also can always, if you have questions after the session, go ahead and reach out to myself, or you can reach out to Dan, whoever your assigned grant manager is. But you also can always email us at our general email box. So that is ceo.illinoisworks@illinois.gov. That comes directly to our team, and you will get feedback from myself, from Dan, or from Norman, someone else on our team, whoever can kind of field your question the best. All right, so let's go ahead. And we are going to actually delve into our first section, talking about outreach and recruitment. So right in line with what many of you were looking to learn from the session today. Excuse me. So we're going to start in section 4 of the Grantee Manual. So this is outreach and recruitment. And by the end of this section, you will be able to list the Illinois Works staff roles, describe the role of outreach and recruitment in the success of the pre-apprenticeship program, describe the types of participant leads and follow-up activities with each lead type, leverage outreach, recruitment resources, methods, samples, and tools to create a pipeline into the pre-apprenticeship program, learn to track outreach and recruitment efforts in the Illinois Works reporting system, and integrate DIBE and the 6 core values into all elements of your program's outreach and recruitment strategy. So we are going to start this section actually talking about staff roles, because as reviewed, we'll be discussing kind of the full programming, how to actually run this program. And during this session, we are specifically going to focus on outreach and recruitment, wraparound services, student support services, transition services, and follow-up services. So each of these require a dedicated staff member to ensure the implementation of a successful program. On your screen, you will see a list of the staff roles that Illinois Works expects all grantees to have in their programs. And you will find a full list of these staff roles along with short summaries of each of them on page 17 of the grantee manual, if you would like to refer to those. But you can see here the list begins with the program administrator. So this individual is responsible for compliance, for ensuring that performance metrics are met, required reporting is completed. The next role is the outreach and recruitment coordinator. So this individual is focused on kind of creating a constant flow of leads into the program and helping those individuals convert over to applicants. They also will conduct standardized interviews, help with applications. So a whole host of kind of those initial activities that are coming when a participant comes into the program. Next up is that wraparound service coordinator. So they are responsible for non-academic supports, and their role begins with that wraparound service assessment that we're going to talk about in a little bit. The next role is the next role is the instructor. So this is an individual or a team of individuals, perhaps even a partner, that is qualified, certified to provide whatever instruction they are hired to provide. So they should be certified in NAB2 and CCER, or they should be certified or qualified to offer ICCB instruction, OSHA 10, first aid CPR, whatever they are hired to do, they should be qualified and certified to do. Next up is the student support services coordinator. So this position is focused on your academic needs. So this individual is going to be helping in the event that participants fall below their attendance thresholds, struggle with any sort of post tests or assessments. Their role is really to help ensure academic success in the program. The next is your transition services coordinator. So they're the ones who are building those relationships in the community to help transition participants. They're also going to be helping with resume assistance, maybe mock interviews, helping to ensure that you're connecting your participants to registered apprenticeship programs or their alternate outcomes if they choose, hopefully they choose to go into registered apprenticeship program, but if they choose to go somewhere else, this transition services coordinator is helping them with that as well. And then that final role is the data entry coordinator. So this individual is responsible for entering data into IWRS, managing that data, ensuring its accuracy. So one thing that I really want to emphasize here is these roles are not necessarily meant to say that you have to have one person in each of these roles. This is a question that we get a lot. These roles are really just meant to be categories of tasks. So it is possible you're going to have a person who, maybe offers your wraparound services and your student support services. And that's fine. We just really want to make sure that there is capacity for that person to be addressing all of the needs that those participants have within those roles. What we learned last year, though, and this is kind of a learned lesson from 2022, is there are two roles that we saw grantees really struggle with if they didn't have a dedicated person in that role. So the first one is your transition services coordinator. That role really should be of course, working with the participants as they get ready to transition, but they really should also be out developing relationships with those registered apprenticeship programs, with unions, with contractors. They really want to be kind of setting the stage so then they can help those participants then move on to their next transition. The second role is your data entry coordinator. This is a data heavy program. So you really want to make sure you have someone who is dedicated to just doing that, to ensuring that your data is accurate, that it's entered in a timely fashion. So like I said, you can kind of overlap in some of these roles, but we really saw a lot of success in programs that had a dedicated transition service coordinator and a dedicated data entry coordinator. All right, so we are going to get back into Mentimeter. So if you have signed out, please head back there, www.menti.com. That code is 61748324. And we're going to ask you which of these roles, so the roles that we just went through, are currently staffed in your organization. All right, great. So instructors, wraparound service coordinators. Great. Okay. All right. So it looks like we got a good number of data entry coordinators, which is great. Definitely a great role to have kind of at the beginning of your program. Outreach and recruitment, also essential. Okay, great. So it looks like there's a lot of staffing around instruction, wraparound services, outreach, and recruitment, data entry. Maybe a little light on our student support service coordinators, but definitely something that can be made up or kind of combined, especially with that wraparound service coordination. They often kind of work in tandem together. Great. Well, thank you all so much for participating in that. It's good to kind of see where all of you kind of land in that area. So let's jump in now to talking about outreach and recruitment. So again, this is section 4 of the grantee manual. And outreach and recruitment provides potential participants with information about your pre-apprenticeship program with the objective of recruiting interested and qualified candidates to your pre-apprenticeship program. The 2023 Grantee Manual will provide you with information, techniques, and tools to help you and your program staff highlight the goals, program components, and core values of the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program. So you all should recognize by now this pre-apprentice participant life cycle. The sections that we're going through today in the Grantee Manual are completely focused on this life cycle. So today we will go start here with outreach and recruitment, and we'll go all the way to follow-up. So outreach and recruitment provides potential participants with information about your pre-apprenticeship program with the goal or with the objective of recruiting interested and qualified candidates. So the primary goal ultimately is to identify those potential participants, or what we call participant leads. Participant leads are individuals who may be interested in enrolling in your pre-apprenticeship training program, and the aim is to funnel those leads through the screening process and transform qualified individuals from leads into applicants. So outreach and recruitment efforts may be the first time that potential participants will interact or encounter with the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program offered by your organization, your program instructors, and or your staff. So it is essential that individuals representing your program can articulate what the program has to offer, as well as a value proposition for those potential participants. Now, on your screen here, you're going to see some templates that we have created for you, a flyer, an information sheet, as well as a marketing plan. You're certainly allowed to create your own marketing materials, but we do provide these just in the event that you want to use one of these templates. The first template here you can see is template number 4. So this is a sample marketing plan and timeline. This is something that we ask all programs to have, a marketing plan. And as Dan and I go through our grantee meetings with each of you, we'll be talking with you a little bit more about developing a marketing plan. Template 6 is template 5 is the Sample Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program flyer. So you can see that in the back there. And then template 6 is your Sample Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program information sheet. So that sheet's given to potential participants who want more detailed information than they might get from the flyer. Again, all of these are available in the grantee manual for your use. They are all located in the appendix of the grantee manual. Thank you, Dan. So Dan just put the grantee manual link in the chat for you. So while outreach and recruitment is often framed as participant focused, outreach and recruitment efforts should also focus on potential partnerships with the goal of growing your partner network. Your partner network can be vital not only in recruiting participants, but also developing those transition relationships and helping with outreach and recruitment. So they might be kind of the amplifier for you as you search for new participants. So, as stated earlier, the primary goal of outreach and recruitment activities is to identify potential participants or participant leads. So, again, participant leads are individuals who may be interested in enrolling in the pre apprenticeship training program. And the aim is to funnel those leads through a screening process and transform qualified individuals from leads into applicants. So, a little bit later, we're going to talk about the screening process and the application process. But for right now, let's continue to talk about what a participant lead is and specifically about lead categories. So, as you pursue your outreach and recruitment activities, it's helpful to understand your target audiences and how you might best communicate with them. This can help you maximize your efforts and get the best return from your outreach and recruitment efforts. So, one helpful way to do that is to categorize your potential participants based on a lead type. So there are 4 different lead types. The first is what we call a hot lead. So a hot lead is someone who has shown a lot of interest in your program. They're ready to start. They're ready to do that application. These are individuals that you're not going to have to do a ton of follow up with. They are ready to go. Your warm leads, these might be someone who they responded to social media marketing. Maybe you met them at a career fair. They're interested, but you're still going to need a little bit of follow up. They might not be as ready and raring to go as your hot leads. Your cold leads are individuals who maybe at some point they responded to social media marketing, but it's been difficult to get them on the phone. They're not really responsive. Maybe you talk with them here and there, but they're just really not necessarily taking a lot of action. But they also haven't told you they do not want to move forward. So there's still a potential, but they're not really ready to get started. And then your final lead category is your closed leads. So these are individuals who have made it absolutely clear they are not interested in moving forward. So at one point, maybe they responded to social media marketing, you would have classified them as a warm lead, but now they're saying absolutely not, I don't want to move forward. That would be a closed lead. So why is it important to categorize these potential participants? So why it's important is because understanding these target audiences and what lead category they may fall into helps you inform how often you should reach out and do a touch with them. So how often should you follow up with them? The goal of your outreach and recruitment efforts is to transform qualified and interested leads into applicants. And this is accomplished through consistent and strategic communication with potential applicants, also known as touches. So a touch is any communication opportunity that motivates qualified individuals to apply. So this can be a social media post, it can be a presentation, a phone call, maybe they get an email from you, a newsletter, blog post, text message, postcard. So it can be really any of these items. It doesn't always necessarily have to be your staff reaching out. That would count as a touch. But one item that is really important to have, and we have seen very effective, is creating your own landing page. So the 2023 Grantee Manual will provide comprehensive guidance on a number of different outreach and recruitment methods. If you're interested in getting more information on kind of that array of methods, you can go to page 69 of the Grantee Manual, and they're all listed there. But one that I really want to highlight is creating this landing page on your organizational website. So the reason I want to call special attention to this is because organization websites will be one of the first locations that potential participants will seek information about your program. These landing pages will also be linked to our Illinois Works heat map and our DCEO site. So when we have individuals who are interested in joining a pre-apprenticeship program, they're going to navigate to our website, and we will link your landing page to our site so they can easily find information about your program. Now, on page 71 of the Grantee Manual, you are going to see a list of items that should be included on your landing page, including program goals, the requirements of the program, the application process, downloadable information sheets, and other key information. So please go to page 71 of the Grantee Manual. We walk through all of the aspects that should be on that landing page. We also have examples of landing pages on our current DCEO site from grantees last year. So if you want some ideas, you can go to our DCEO site as well and click on any of their links to get an example of that landing page. So let's go back to Mentimeter. And I just want to get an understanding from all of you, what type of touches are currently part of your outreach and recruitment plan? So what are you currently doing to connect with your participants? So again, we're going back to Mentimeter, www.menti.com. Awesome. Okay, so email, social media outreach, in-person outreach, orientations, weekly info sessions, phone and text. Awesome. Job fairs, events, word of mouth. Awesome. Yeah, you guys are doing a great job. This is great. So media release. You guys are going so fast. This thing is going crazy. Thank you so much for engaging. Uh, Information sessions, Facebook, absolutely. Social media is a huge driver. We've seen a lot of success for our programs who utilize social media. Old colleagues, absolutely. Those alumni networks, other partner relationships, digital marketing, events, email follow-up. These are all great. Absolutely. So you guys all seem like you are on kind of the right track as far as these touches. So this is really great. And the reason why we focus on these touches is because what we know to be true is that the average participant requires somewhere between 6 and 8 touches before you can kind of convert one of those cold leads into an applicant. So what that means is that it's going to take 6 to 8 times that that person's interacting with your program before they might convert over to that applicant status. But what we also have seen is that by the 3rd or 4th touch, roughly 90% of organizations stop trying. And this is not just in our network, this is across the board of training programs of nonprofits, that 90% of organizations, they hit 3 or 4 and they stop trying. And so what we really want to do is reframe these touches and reframe them not as you have to get up to this many, but really think of them as a countdown. So you get to 4 touches, you're maybe 2 or 3 touches out from that person becoming an applicant. So we encourage you to keep emailing them, keep reaching out to them, keep inviting them to information sessions, get them in touch with your social media, things like that, because the more that you can reach out to them, the more likely they are to come in, come back, engage, and apply. So really keep that in mind. Don't feel defeated if at 3 or 4 touches that person isn't responding to you. Keep trying, get to that 6 to 8 touches, and you will see a lot more success there as people start to convert over. Now, there are a lot of different ways and kind of steps to follow up with these individuals, but if you're looking for some suggestions, table 10 of the Grantee Manual, so that is on page 66, we've offered some kind of action steps that you can take along with a follow-up timeline. And this is categorized by lead type. So obviously it's going to take a lot less follow-up to get someone who is a hot lead to come in because they're already ready to go. Same with a warm lead. You might need to do some more touches with your cold leads, but here's kind of a sample timeline for you. Another tool that I mentioned earlier that will help with this outreach and recruitment is the Illinois Works heat map. The Illinois Works heat map is just one of the tools that we provide to really help your program be successful. This technology provides an overview of statewide demographic data, Illinois Works project data, as well as the location and essential information of all Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship programs and DOL registered apprenticeship programs. So in the coming weeks, each of your organizations will be added to this heat map. You will also be added to our website. Through the course of our meetings with each of you, or as you meet with your grant manager, we'll be asking you who you would like, whose contact information you would like added to this map. So we will be getting all of you onto this map very soon. And then you will start to see potential participants reach out to you from this site. This is also where we get any sort of internal referrals. So you will also start getting referrals from our team of people who've reached out to us looking for a program. So just keep in mind, this is always a resource for all of you to find additional information about demographics, about current programs or current projects, as well as about registered apprenticeship programs. But as far as outreach and recruiting, this is a really useful tool that we are putting out there to really get all of your programs to be public facing. So let's jump back to Mentimeter. And I want to know a little bit more. So given your target audience, what locations might be appropriate for distribution of either flyers or information sheets? So thinking about your audience, where might they go? Where might they look for this type of information? Store, absolutely. Social media, schools, bus stops, community-based programs, absolutely activating those partnerships, libraries, the laundromat, daycare centers, community-based programs, absolutely. CBOs, local businesses, churches, definitely a huge network, local businesses, absolutely. All of these are great suggestions. So I hope if you're looking at this list and you don't currently kind of send flyers to these sections, but it would fit your target audience, really encourage you to kind of note some of these down, because these are all great, absolutely. So local WIOA offices, your local workforce board oftentimes can help with recruiting, park districts. Let's see, food banks, absolutely, daycare centers, our website, elementary schools. Great. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of those. Those are right in line with where we see the most success in recruiting our participants. So let's now move on to the next step. So imagine with me for a second, you have now done your outreach and recruitment. You have your pool of potential participants. Now it's time to go through the pre-screening process. So the pre-screening process falls under outreach and recruitment, and it's really meant to be kind of your first check for basic eligibility. So you're trying to determine if this applicant, this potential participant, meets those Illinois Works basic requirements. So this pre-screen assessment, you're going to find this in IWRS. And it's going to consist of 5 questions, and these are all based on the eligibility requirements of Illinois Works. Question 1 is, do you have an interest in making a career in the construction industry? Question 2 is, do you have the ability to attend the program? So does this person have the time? Are they going to be able to attend? Perhaps do they have, the ability to get to the program? Number 3 is, do you have a high school diploma or a GED? Number 4 is, are you at least 18 years of age? And number 5 is, are you an Illinois resident? So these are the basic eligibility points for the Illinois Works program. You have to be an Illinois resident. You have to be 18 years of age. You have to have a high school diploma or GED. You have to have the ability to attend the program, so the time availability to attend the program. And then, do you have an interest in going into construction and the building trades? That is it. We do not have any sort of income requirements. I know other programs do. These are the basic requirements of our program. So once an individual answers these questions, if they say yes to all of them, they are someone who might be likely to be a good applicant for your program. So if they're interested in completing an application, they would be qualified to move forward to that next step. After completing those 5 questions, the assessment's also going to ask about how that individual heard about the program. It's going to ask the participant's sex and race, and the grant, and then you will be able to determine if this is an individual who meets the program requirements. So once this assessment is completed and the individual is entered into IWRS, they will be listed as what we call an inquiry in the system. So this just means they're a person who is interested in the program, but they haven't yet done an application. So now at this point, there's kind of a fork in the road. So that person can stay in inquiry, or they can move on to be an applicant. So we're going to talk a little bit more about applications in our next section. But first, I want to just show you kind of what the IWRS system is going to look like when you enter a new participant. So in IWRS, you will choose Add Participant, and this is the screen that will come up. So it will ask for their basic, information, contact information. You can see you can list them as a warm lead. You can also add, any lead category there. Your provider will be auto selected for you, and then you can select a follow-up date. So that just allows you to, if this person says, I'm not ready to move forward with anything quite yet, you can add a follow-up date there, and the system will hold on to that and let you know when you need to follow up with that person. But then you'll go ahead and press submit and add case note, and it'll actually take you straight into that pre-screen assessment. So you will go through those questions that I walked through with you, check their basic eligibility, and then you can decide, are you going to leave them just in this pre-screen status, or are they ready to move on to be an applicant? So before we jump into program application, I just want to check if there are any questions from any of our grantees. Please feel free to unmute or add your question to the chat.
There's a question, a couple. One from Mike, question about basic qualifications. What about unhoused candidates? And then I'll read the second one once you respond to Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike, great question. So we don't have any restrictions around unhoused candidates. If they are interested in moving forward with the program, they're interested, they meet all of our qualifications, they're welcome to participate. Obviously, that is a population that is going to need significantly more support. So it would be definitely on your program to counsel them, help connect them with resources around potential maybe interim housing or any other support services they might need. You also want to counsel them on kind of maybe additional resources of where they can get a temporary address. So some community-based organizations will offer their address just so individuals can have a physical address so they can apply for employment or for registered apprenticeship programs, but we have no restrictions around admitting unhoused candidates.
We also have a question from Alejandro from St. Augustine. Do we have to submit all our cold leads as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So Alejandro, what we see most often is that when individuals get entered into the system, they're going to be a warm or hot lead. We do ask that you still, if you have someone who kind of comes in as a cold lead, we do ask that you submit them into IWRS. But what we've seen most often is that individuals are getting entered at that warm and hot lead status, and then they kind of fall into a cold or closed lead status. So that's kind of the most likely scenario, but we do ask that you enter all of your leads. Great questions. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Let's see. Any in the chat?
I got one if you got a second.
Yeah, William, what's going on?
The age requirements you spoke about and I've read about is 18 to be able to apply. What if the area unions, because for instance, I got out of high school, went straight into sheet metal workers apprenticeship program, and I was able to apply, take my test and interview at age 17.
Yeah, so for our program, it is 18 and above. We do have some exceptions for high school-based programs that they contingent on by the time they finish the program, they'll be 18. We designed that eligibility requirement really focus on the fact that the vast majority of registered apprenticeship programs require age 18. I know there are some that will, allow you to apply a little bit younger, but for our program, it is 18 and above for
For
general
entrance.
programs.
Okay.
Yeah, outside of
So,
high schools. Yeah.
okay. So if they must be 18 at time of applying, not at time of graduation, pretty much.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, William.
We have another question from Eva. If a person does not have a social security number, how would they be able to apply? Besides them not being able to participate in RAP, is there any other difference?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question to Eva, and we're actually about to address that. So you actually are giving us a good lead into our next section. So if you can hold tight for just a second, we're going to talk about that as part of the program application. So let's move on to our next section. So in our kind of imaginary scenario here, we have pre-screened an applicant. They are eligible to move forward. And now we are going to walk them through the application process. So in this section, you are going to learn how to leverage standardized tools and templates, including the program application, interview questionnaire, acceptance letter, conditional acceptance letter, and denial letter, reference the eligibility requirements for program participation, complete application and intake requirements, including the application and standardized interview in the Illinois Works reporting system, and integrate diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, and the 6 core values into all elements of your program's application and intake process. So Section 5 in your grantee manual, that is where you are going to find all of the information about participant applications and intake. And the Illinois Works program application process is designed to enroll participants who are able and ready to make a career in the construction trades. So you can see we've now moved on to the second step in the life cycle process. And once a participant is ready to move on to this application stage, there are several eligibility requirements, as we kind of just reviewed, but there's also some additional considerations. So Eva, this is where we are going to address your question here. So the first eligibility is age 18. And actually, you know what, William, I misspoke here because actually our grantee manual says 18 upon completion. So I apologize for that. So 18 upon completion. The second one is they need to have a high school GED or GED. They also are required to be English proficient as far as they're able to interact with training. So all of our training has to be done in English. And so it is a requirement of our program that these individuals can engage in English. They also need to have that time availability. So are they able to attend the program? And then they need to pass a standardized interview. So we're going to talk about that interview process in just a minute. But those are the basic eligibility requirements. We also have several considerations. Gia, can you actually go back to the last slide for me? So there are several items on here that they're just basic considerations. They're not eligibility requirements per se. So the first one of those is your driver's license. So we do not require that someone has a driver's license to enter the program. However, if they do enter the program and they need assistance to get a driver's license, that is an allowable cost. That would be considered a wraparound service. You can help to pay driver's education fees. You can help them go through that process. So that's something to note. The second one is the Social Security number. So we are a state-funded program, and as a result, our program does not require someone to have a Social Security number to enter our program. Now, the one thing that I really want to stress here is that this is considered an additional consideration, because while you can accept them into our program, we do ask that you counsel that individual that there might be some difficulty getting into other programs if the reason that they don't have a Social Security number is they're not actually eligible to work in the United States. They cannot get into a US DOL registered apprenticeship program without that authorization. So that is something to counsel them on. Again, we do not require it, but that could create some barriers for them that you all should make them aware of. Another one is reliable transportation. So again, that is a wraparound service that you all can help provide for them and would be covered under your grant. It does not disqualify them, but again, it's something you want to work with them on, just because oftentimes we're going to see that our participants are driving far distances to work on work sites. So that might be something they need some assistance on. And then the next one is drug testing. So we here at Illinois Works, we will ask them about any sort of drug use, really focused on the fact that many of our registered apprenticeship programs are going to have that requirement that you are drug free. They might stipulate it in different ways, but that's something that you also want to catch early on, so you can start to counsel your participants on if the registered apprenticeship program that they're going into has certain specifications about you need to be drug free for 30 days before application or whatever they specify. You want to ensure to catch that early so that you can counsel them on what they need to do going forward through the program. So thank you so much, Gia, for going back on that for me. I just wanted to really stress the difference there. All right. So next up, so actually, William, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the standardized interview, you said the past standardized interview. I run a couple other grant funded programs here at Richland, and I have a math assessment at every orientation. And then if they don't do so well on the math assessment, we offer free tutoring to get them up and running. Will that be allowed with this as well? Because I know math, with being in the trades as long as I was, math is important. I mean, one of the most
Absolutely.
important things that you could gain skill in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So, absolutely, you can do that type of assessment. The only thing we ask is that that doesn't bar them from entering the program. So, if that assessment is utilized just to kind of get that baseline to match them to a tutor or additional support, that is totally fine. We just ask that any sort of, TABE test or other math assessment that might be done is not used to disqualify them from the program.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All
No
right,
other
great.
questions in the chat.
Okay, what was the question in the chat, Fierly?
I said there were no other questions
Oh,
in
there
the
were no other questions in the chat. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to our step one. So our program application. So again, if applicants meet the pre-screen assessment requirements, the next step is to complete a program application. And this application can be completed electronically with that outreach and recruitment coordinator, so between the participant and the outreach and recruitment coordinator, or it can be completed as a paper application and then entered into the database later on. So it just depends on what that participant is comfortable doing. And so the application is where you are going to have additional information about the participant. That's where this, kind of additional eligibility or additional considerations are going to be assessed. The application is also going to take into consideration their employment history, if they have any previous interaction with the criminal justice system. Again, this is just kind of gathering information so that you and your team can counsel them on where they can go in their transition, what additional supports they may need, what additional connections you may need to make to help them succeed in this space. All right. So now we have arrived at our standardized interview. So we've taken our participant through pre-screening, we've done their application, and now we've decided we want to interview them. So the standardized interview allows you to gather additional insight into the applicant's interests, long-term goals, and what the participant hopes to gain from the pre-apprenticeship program. The interview must be conducted by at least 2 staff members who record the applicant's answers, provide independent scores, and then calculate the average of the 2 scores for the applicant. So the maximum average score is 40 and a minimum score for acceptance is 32. So in the grantee manual, you are going to see a copy of the standardized interview. That is exhibit number 4. So please refer to that. It is in the appendix. You will also see a copy of it in IWRS when we go through that in next week's IWRS training. But the maximum average score is 40 and the minimum score for acceptance is 32. The final interview score and both interviewers' questionnaires must be scanned and uploaded into IWRS. So again, this standardized interview is going to be done by 2 staff members. You will both interview this participant, you will score their answers, average those scores, and if they get a 32 or above, they can be accepted into the program. Now, if they get below a 32, but there are some sort of mitigating factors, we would be open to also accepting that person, but we would need to understand why those mitigating factors are being taken into consideration. So oftentimes our interviews are really focused on if this person wants to have a long-term career in construction, and if they're scoring below 32, that person might not be a good fit for the program and they might be difficult to transition at the end. So once we get through the standardized interview, you are going to provide them an enrollment decision. So enrollment decisions should be accompanied by a formal letter from your program to the applicant that clearly communicates the enrollment decision. So we ask that you provide these letters to them. You can use our templates that we have provided, or you can utilize your own letter that you have. But we categorize them in 3 kind of spaces. So the first one is full acceptance. So this is for applicants who they meet all of the eligibility requirements. They scored a 32 or above on their standardized interview, and they are considered a full acceptance. That is going to be located in template number 9 in the grantee manual if you want to use that full acceptance letter. Conditional acceptance is for applicants who have met or have a willingness to meet all of the program requirements. And they have also scored 32 or higher on their standardized interview, or there are some mitigating factors. So these are individuals that, might at, initial outset lack a driver's license. But they're willing to get a driver's license. So they're more willing to be able to have a successful transition at the end of the program. So you're going to offer them a conditional acceptance. A conditional acceptance is also really good for someone who might say that they completed a GED program, but they can't provide any sort of documentation for that. So you're providing them conditional acceptance on the basis that they're going to provide you some sort of documentation that they in fact have a GED or a high school diploma. And then finally, a denial letter. A denial letter is for those individuals who have not met that 32, that score of 32 on their standardized interview. There are no mitigating factors. You've just gotten through the process and realized they just might not be a good fit for the program. Maybe they have expressed that they don't really want a career in construction. That's not really a good person to have in the program. So that person would receive a denial letter. So again, that full acceptance letter is in the appendix in template 9. The conditional acceptance letter is template 10. And then the denial letter is template 11. So all of those are available for your use in the grantee manual. So are there any, oh, I apologize. I am a little bit off on my slides here. So let me kind of pause here and talk about administrative withdrawal. So administrative withdrawal is not an enrollment decision, but I want to talk about it here because it does have to do with kind of accepting your participants. So an administrative withdrawal is when you have offered acceptance to a participant, they have accepted that, and then they never show up. So we, unfortunately, I think we've all been in this space long enough to know that sometimes that happens. We think we have someone who's going to attend, then they never attend, and we can't get in touch with them. So an administrative withdrawal is when they have every intention to come, and then come day one of instruction, they don't show up. So for administrative withdrawals, they do not count as an enrollment because they did not actually attend instruction. But we do ask that you know, that first week of instruction, follow up with them, try to get in touch with them, see if they're able to attend. Maybe they can come back and make up hours. But if you just never get in touch with them, if they never show up, they would be considered an administrative withdrawal, even if they were fully accepted to the program. Okay, so now are there any questions about enrollment decisions, about the application process? I know that was a lot of information in that section, so please let me know if you have any questions.
There are no questions in the chat.
No questions in the chat. Okay. Okay, great. All right, so our next section, we are going to talk about the intake process. So at this point, your participant has gone through the application, they've gone through the interview, they've been accepted to the program, and now you are going to do intake. And so by the end of this section, you are going to be able to describe the importance and tasks related to the intake process, including the wraparound service assessment, which is the largest part of the intake process. So following an acceptance, your participants will move into the intake process, and the intake process should focus on intake staff and case managers, wraparound service coordinators meeting with participants one-on-one. So this intake process is really focused around a one-on-one intake meeting. And in that meeting, you want to start building rapport with your participants. You want to start assessing your participants' needs and establishing those wraparound supports to help address any additional support that they might need that is non-academic. So in these intake meetings, they really are a key moment where you can start to build a positive cohort culture. And it's important to remember that the intake meeting will be the first time program staff will be interacting with individuals as a pre-apprentice program participant. So up until this point, they have been an applicant, they've been a potential applicant, but now they are a member of this cohort. And so you want to make them feel welcomed. You want to start building that rapport with them and making sure that they feel right off the bat that they're going to be included. So when we start to build rapport with participants, what we're doing is creating a professional relationship with them that features emotional, mutual understanding and connection that results in a trusting relationship between program instructors, staff, and program participants. And building rapport is essential to creating a program culture that fosters belonging, inclusion, and collaboration. And these intake meetings are really a great space to start building that rapport and start making those individuals feel welcome, feel like they belong, feel like they're included in your program culture. When participants feel that they have trust and they can trust those around them, they are better and more likely to engage in instruction, support services, and career transition. And the ability to build rapport with participants is a skill like any other. It can be learned, and it can be improved over time. So if this is something that perhaps right now your program wants to focus on strengthening, building rapport is something you really can build on and really help those participants feel included. So let's jump back to Mentimeter. And I want to hear from all of you about what techniques that you currently use or you're planning to use to build rapport. Social media. Okay. Any other techniques that you use to build rapport? And remember, building rapport is really, it's starting to get into these kind of, yes, one-on-one sessions. This is when you're going to start to think about, active listening, using their name, absolutely, personal interviews, do the application with them instead of sending them a link. Absolutely. So that's building that rapport even before we get into this intake meeting. It's really giving that personal touch. So team building exercises. So that definitely can be something once you get into kind of the orientation stage, you're starting to build that cohort culture. Communication, counseling appointments, phone calls, case management appointments. So absolutely. So building that rapport is really kind of, again, building that mutual trust, building that understanding, helping that individual feel like they are part of that team, and they're part of now your program. So being open-minded, not judgmental, holding students in our minds and coming alongside them. Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like that is maybe someone who is a social worker or has gone through social work. That is definitely social work language, coming alongside someone, absolutely wanting to be in alignment with them. So in-person interviews, staying in contact with them, inviting them to events, completing the application, the customer, listening to their needs. Absolutely. So all of these are great examples of how you start to build rapport. So definitely kind of a simple one is that, might seem obvious, but remembering their names is a really big thing. Being prepared for them when you have a meeting for them. So make them feel like you had dedicated time set away from them for them and you are ready to engage with them. Talking to people, getting to know them personally, absolutely. Finding out their needs and outlook in construction and assessments, inviting them to events, making participants know they can come to any staff member for questions or concerns, being respectful, absolutely. So all of you are absolutely on the right track with this. So it's really making this person feel like they are part of your team. And I think all of those techniques really will do that. So either if you're already doing that, great job. If you are planning to do that, awesome. I think all of you are on the right track to really building that good positive culture. Before we move out of this section, are there any questions that I can answer at this point? Feel free to unmute, feel free to put it in the chat.
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay, all right, great. So we are going to move on to our next module. So this is connected to your intake meeting. But in this section, we are going to, you're going to be able to complete a wraparound service assessment and deliver wraparound services, provide additional support for participants with complex needs, and comply with the Illinois Works guidance for performance-based stipends. So this wraparound service assessment is happening in your intake meeting. So that is how we're kind of connecting now. We've now gone through that application, they've now been enrolled, and now we're in this intake meeting with this wraparound service assessment. More information can be found about this in section 6 of the grantee manual. And you can also see we've moved on in our pre-apprentice life cycle from intake to now into this wraparound service section. So assessing participant needs for wraparound services is a critical part of the intake process. Wraparound services is support and addresses non-academic needs to reduce or eliminate barriers for entrance and success into a DOL registered apprenticeship program. So these can include an array of options, and participants must opt into a wraparound service. So that's very important. They must opt into a wraparound service. The opt-in model requires participants to meet with a wraparound service coordinator one-on-one, so in that intake meeting, and establish services during the program while beginning and planning to address the needs long term. So this assessment must be completed with each participant as part of this intake process and in a face-to-face format with your wraparound service coordinator. So just keep in mind that the staff's role is to offer the services and individuals opt in. The role of the staff is not to assign services. So this is really about your participants deciding what it is they need. What are the services and supports they need to be successful? So they must opt in. And this assessment is completed during that intake meeting. However, we all know that things might change throughout the program. If you have a participant who partway through the program identifies that they need an additional service, so they need additional support, that is fine. All you'll need to do is you'll just complete another one of these wraparound service assessments, updating what they've opted into, and then that will be available for them to receive as part of the system. So if they change, circumstances change, maybe their babysitter is no longer available to them, they need childcare partway through the program, that's fine. They can be reassessed and those services can be added at any point while they're an active participant. So let's now talk about what wraparound services the Illinois Works program requires. So grantees must offer either internally or through partnerships each of the following wraparound services: apprenticeship application fees, transportation costs, childcare or family member care, technology assistance for virtual learning. So that might be like broadband fees or hardware for them to participate in virtual learning, driver's education fees, mentorship, financial literacy, alumni networking, and then any other wraparound support services that might be identified. So this is not an exhaustive list. You might have a participant who needs additional support. You certainly can offer that additional support. We just ask that you reach out to your grant manager prior to expensing that additional wraparound support service, just to make sure that that is an allowable cost under your grant. But by and large, at least from experience last year, most of the items that fell outside of this list, we were able to provide. But we just always like to say better safe than sorry. So if you're planning to offer a support service outside of this list, please just let your grant manager know. All right. So let's jump back to Mentimeter. And I want to understand right now, so obviously these services can be internal or through partnerships, but what partnerships have you established to provide these wraparound services? So what partnerships have you established to help provide wraparound services? Mental health counseling, absolutely. That's a great one. Food banks, healthcare agencies, connecting them to healthcare agencies. Okay, great. Homeless shelters, absolutely. Healthcare agencies, mental health, student services department, food banks, let's see, homeless shelters, community clinics, Great. These are all great. I'm glad that you guys have already started establishing these partnerships or have these existing partnerships before you started the program. Um, let's see what else. Networking with other organizations, tutoring services, childcare agencies. Definitely those two are big in our program. Tutoring and childcare are definitely big services. You want to make sure you have partnerships or you can offer internally. Let's see what else. Healthcare, barber, college. Is that free haircuts? I think it just got cut off a little bit there. Great. So all of these are great partnerships. So I'm glad that you guys have already started establishing them. We are very open to partnerships, especially in this space. We don't expect that your organization can do every single thing on your own. So please continue to develop these partnerships, strengthen these partnerships. And you'll also be guided by your participants in which partnerships you might need to grow, because you might have some participants who come in and they have a specific need. And that's not a need that you can provide for internally, but you can start to build the relationships to get that need addressed and remove that barrier for that participant. So all of these are great. So community colleges, career coaches are some new ones that got in there. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for offering those up. Those are all great wraparound service partnerships that you've already built. So in addition to wraparound services, which are really intended to be those non-academic supports, the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program requires the provision of a stipend. So stipends are a payment made to a trainee or a pre-apprentice program participant for living expenses and are designed to ensure that participants can maintain financial solvency throughout the tenure of the program. So there is a sample of a stipend policy in the grantee manual. If you do not have an existing stipend policy, you can utilize that template. And that is available in the appendix of the grantee manual as template number 12. So please feel free, if you do not have one, to please utilize that one. However, if you do have an existing policy and it meets or exceeds the Illinois Works policy, you can maintain your own policy. Just keep in mind that if you choose to implement your own policy, we just ask that you send it into your grant manager just so we can make sure that it meets the minimum qualifications of what Illinois Works is asking. So it's important to remember that stipends are not a wage and program participants are not employees. And we make that distinction really clear because there are certain stipulations that go into paying a wage, specifically certain taxes that are required to get taken out. So we really need all of the language around stipends to stay as a stipend, which means there cannot be wage equivalencies. We ask you to kind of move away from any sort of comparison to a wage. Stipends are a separate entity, and that is what this program provides. So let's talk a little bit about policies, specific pieces that need to be part of your policy. So again, these are kind of the basic pieces that need to be in your policy. If your existing stipend policy has these, great, you can keep it. If you want to set up a new policy, we have that template for you. You can utilize that as well. So the first aspect is grantees must provide stipends of up to $13 per instructional hour. So up to is the key there. So I know some of you offer a little bit less, but we just need to make sure that that $13 is the cap per instructional hour. The second piece is that stipends must be the same for all instructional activities. So what that means is you can't, for instance, have your classroom hours at $10 per instructional hour and then your worksite hours at $13. It needs to be one set stipend amount. Stipends can only be provided to participants. So that means that these are active participants. They are showing up to your classes. They are doing their post assessments, they're moving through the program. They cannot be provided to people who have graduated from the program. They have to be active participants in your program. And the fourth piece is that stipends must be reduced if participants do not meet or exceed attendance and performance measures. So the stipend is a performance-based stipend. So you can kind of design how you want to set up that stipend, that performance aspect of the stipend. Different organizations do it differently, but we do need to have some sort of adjustment to that stipend based on performance. So again, there is a template, template 13 is where you can actually get a sample performance-based stipend procedure. So if you have not implemented this before, we provide both a templated stipend policy and a templated stipend procedure. So how this will actually be operationalized. Those are the kind of basics of the stipend. Again, template 12, template 13 in the grantee manual, both of those are in the appendix for you. So please utilize them if you don't have one of those existing policies or procedures. So let's see if there are any questions in the chat. So Veerly, are there any questions?
Yes, there are. We have two. One previous question from Natasha. She wanted to kind of go back and ask a question regarding wraparound services.
Okay.
She asked, does DUI classes fall into wraparound services?
So it certainly can. So it would kind of depend on what exactly would go into that. So I would suggest kind of talking with your grantee manager about, if, especially if there's any sort of kind of legal aspect of it, we might need to kind of talk through that a little bit more. But that's a great question. So I would encourage you to reach out to your grant manager and kind of give them a little bit more context for what that might look like. Great question,
Okay,
though.
great question. The second question comes from Mike. Per this discussion, are these stipends taxable income?
So yeah, great question, Mike. So stipends are taxable income, but the federal income taxes are not taken out of stipends. So Social Security and Medicare, those are not removed from stipends, but stipends do count or can count as taxable income depending on the rest of your income level. Any other questions?
No, those were the only two. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Vera Lee. And thank you, Natasha and Mike, for those questions. So we are now at a point, we're running a little bit ahead of time. I know I've been going through this stuff quickly, but why don't we go ahead and let's take a break. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So let's come back at 11:05. During that time, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them over the break. But I will see you guys back here at 11:05. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are going to jump into our next section. Um, so I'm going to continue in section 6 of the Grantee Manual. So we just went through wraparound services, which is the first half of section 6 of the Grantee Manual, and now we are going to get into the second half. So we're going to be talking about student support services. So by the end of this module, you will be able to provide student support services. You will track participants' attendance, academic performance, and respond to student alerts in the Illinois Works reporting system. You will develop policies for makeup of post assessments and missed sessions, be able to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements, and integrate diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, and the 6 core values into all elements of your program's wraparound and student support services. So here in section 6, we are going to talk about student support services in the Grantee Manual. And student support services are supports that address academic needs. So, unlike wraparound services, some of these supports are mandatory for participants based on challenges related to attendance or performance. So, again, remember those wraparound services, they're opting into those. For student support services, some of these are going to be mandatory for them. So, student support services can be provided on a mandatory or voluntary basis. So, student support services are mandatory when a participant does not meet the required attendance thresholds or the post assessment thresholds. So, that is when these student support services are mandatory. For participants to successfully complete the pre apprenticeship program, they must have 80% or higher attendance per training module and 70% or higher scores per post assessment per module. So again, I really want to stress the attendance is 80% or higher per training module, and assessment scores are 70% or higher per training module. So those are very important to remember that these thresholds are not for the whole program. They're for those individual training service modules that you are offering. So now, if a student were to drop below their attendance or their performance thresholds, they are required to either make up hours or retake the post assessment that they failed. So you must have these requirements outlined in the participants commitment agreement, which we'll talk about a little bit later in our program today. But participants may also request additional academic supports. So here's where getting into kind of the voluntary side of student support services. So students may request additional tutoring. They might request additional time to take a post assessment. And those are great. So you really want to support them academically. So if they do need tutoring, if they do need more time to take a test, they can certainly request that. And then if any of these student support services are needed either due to dropping below one of those thresholds or voluntarily, the student support services coordinator is going to add those student support services to the Illinois Works reporting system. So I just want to kind of pull out. So if a participant falls below those attendance or those post assessment thresholds, the student support service coordinator is going to meet with that person and they're going to set up the services that that person needs to get back on track academically. So that could be retaking that exam, that could be doing makeup hours, but you might also have students who approach you and say, I'm really struggling in math. So William mentioned earlier, math is an area that's extremely important to the building trades. And it's also an area that we see most participants struggle on. So you might have a participant come to you and voluntarily request additional academic support. Either way, if it's a mandatory service or a voluntary service, those should be recorded in the Illinois Works reporting system. So now, I also want to just mention here, and this is a new addition this year regarding attendance. is specifically around recording attendance in the classroom. So it is best practice in many of these training programs to keep a roster. So a written roster in which your participants are going to come in, they're going to sign their names, you might have them sign in, sign out, but at the end of the week or of the module, you're going to have your instructor sign off and just state, yes, I verify this attendance is correct. For our program, we do ask that you keep those rosters. If you have some other sort of timekeeping system, we're willing to kind of talk with you through that. But we do offer a template of an attendance roster in the grantee manual. So that is template number 21. You can feel free to use that template, or if you have an existing template. But this is just a way to verify that the attendance that is being entered into the Illinois Work system is accurate, but it's also going to be really important for those certifications. So many of our certifications that you guys are working on, so first aid, especially OSHA, NCCER, they're also going to want to verify that your participants were in these courses, that they met the hours that they need to meet to get that certification. So you want to make sure to have those attendance rosters. It's also very important for stipends. So again, we need a stipend for every instructional hour. So we want to make sure to have proof, just a little bit of, some of that CYA for your organization to make sure you can show, you paid out John Doe this many instructional hours. Here is our verification that he was in those instructional hours. So this is a new addition this year that we have this attendance roster template. So feel free to use it. Again, that's template number 21 in the grantee manual. Next up, let's talk about participant evaluation, or what we often refer as a post-assessment score. So all modules must feature a scored post-assessment at the end of each module to ensure that participants have successfully met their learning objectives. So each post-assessment must have a score of 0% to 100%. So it must have a scored assessment. Post-assessments cannot be pass or fail. They have to have a score attached to them. And participant scores must be immediately recorded in IWRS to track student progress and to alert academic support staff of subpar performance. If a participant scores less than 70% on a post-assessment, IWRS is going to add a red flag to their profile so you can identify who needs those additional student support services. And it's really important to be adding these items in live because it helps to really just track, who might need that additional support, who might need additional tutoring, who needs to go back and do their makeup tests, whatever that might be. But it's really important that all of these post assessments are scored assessments. They are not pass or fail. All right. So now let's say that you have a red flag that has come up. How do you go about removing those red flags? So student support service coordinators are responsible for identifying the need for coordinating and ensuring the successful delivery of student support services. This staff has access to a robust Illinois Works reporting system dashboard and a suite of reports that will allow them to easily identify participants with red flag alerts. These alerts are meant to signal that participants need additional assistance. So these are not, sometimes red flag sounds a little bit negative, but really what they're meant to be is calling your attention, hey, this participant might need additional support. So you want to connect with them to make sure that they are getting back on track, that they have all of the tools they need to succeed. If a participant's red flags are related to their academic needs, such as excessive absences or missing or failing post-assessments or struggling with key lessons, your student support service coordinator must develop a student support action plan. So this outlines a set of tasks that the participant is going to go through to regain good standing in the program. And these services must outline the dates for makeup sessions, post-assessment retakes, referrals to tutoring services, or provide a longer time for test taking. And once these services are delivered, they should be marked as complete in IWRS. So when you have a participant who maybe needs extra time, they need makeup hours, or they need to retake a post assessment, your student support service coordinator is going to add that service into IWRS. And that is what that student support service action plan is. It's adding that service to IWRS so that you, that individual, you, the rest of your staff can see this individual is actively moving through getting this additional support. So we do have a couple of templates for you that you can utilize. So template 14 is a sample of extenuating circumstances policy for makeup, post assessments, and sessions. So this is just a policy outlining what extenuating circumstances might count to get these makeup hours or those retesting. And then the other template is template 15, which is a sample makeup sessions and post-assessment policy. So this is a policy that just outlines, that these makeups will be available. This is when they will be available. This is how to, enroll to get extra hours to make up the hours that were missed. So again, these are items that you may have existing in your program. If you already have those, that's great. If you don't, we do have these two templates in the grantee manual for your use. So now, in addition to matching the participant with necessary academic supports, student support service coordinators can also partner with their wraparound service coordinators to address any barriers that might be preventing the participant from successfully engaging. So, if you have a participant who is kind of scoring low on their post assessment, that might be something that's really related to needing extra tutoring. But if you have a participant who's consistently missing hours, it might be because, they're dealing with transportation issues, they're dealing with childcare issues. There's something else going on that is a non-academic need. And in that case, you want to also connect them with your wraparound service coordinator. So that person should then kind of work with them to determine if they need any sort of wraparound services added, or if they need an increase in certain wraparound services they're already getting, to ensure that they can attend the course that they have signed up for, that they are moving through the program, and that they will successfully complete and then be able to transition. So those red flags, they can kind of work in tandem together. Because oftentimes we see those post assessments or missing hours is a symptom of something else that might be going on. So you just want to be really attentive to that to make sure that your participants are getting the support that they need. So now we're going to jump over to Mentimeter. So I'll give you all a quick second to just get over to Mentimeter. Again, that's www.menti.com. And then you will go ahead and enter in your code there, which is 61748324. Just give you just a second to jump over there. And then if you can go ahead and answer this question. So what partnerships have you established to help provide student support services? What kind of partnerships have you established to provide these academic supports? Or maybe they're partnerships that you have identified you need, but you haven't established them yet. Let's see, Project Read Plus, tutoring in math and literacy, great. Chicago Teachers Union Foundation, tutoring at the city colleges, tutoring services, reading and math tutoring at the public library, absolutely. Tutoring is essential. We have seen math is often the area that most of our participants struggle in. So the more support that you can give them in that space, the more tutoring support you can give them, is really beneficial. We see most of our programs really focus heavily on that math component because it's the space that they're seeing most of their participants kind of struggle in. So let's see, adding math classes to the curriculum, tutoring with T. Smith, I'm guessing is a tutor out there. So outside vendors, great. Success coaching, provide union visits, Kennedy King College, read out loud. Absolutely. So these are all great partnerships and really focused on those academic services. So thank you so much for providing those. I think you guys are all on a good track of those established partnerships.
Christine, we had one question in the chat. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, what's going on?
Mike had another question. I think he kind of went back a little bit regarding the stipends. It says, what about for online classes?
So online classes, we do allow online classes. However, if they are asynchronous, so they are not happening live virtually, they do not count as instructional hours. So if you are having your classes watch a recording, even if you do a recording and then they watch it whenever they want, uh, that does not count as an instructional hour and they cannot get a stipend for that time. Stipends are only for those synchronous instructional hours. So when you are actually live with a instructor or at a union visit on a work site, those items. So they need to be kind of those live hours happening in real time. Okay, so I see Mike's comment. So, for attendance, specifically for keeping a roster when there's no paper form possible? Yeah, so great question, Mike. So you definitely can kind of get creative with this. I know some organizations, if they're doing kind of that synchronous online, they will have everyone kind of sign in. So you can do something with like almost like a Mentimeter type thing where you say, okay, I was here on this date. You can have the instructor actually fill out a paper roster on your end and state that they see everyone is engaged. Whenever you're doing kind of this online training, you want to make sure that those individuals kind of have their cameras on. You can see that they're engaged. So that's going to really, if you're doing that, kind of fall more heavily on your instructor to ensure that they're verifying those individuals were in those hours. Because again, it comes down to your certificates. You need to prove for certain certificates how many hours those individuals were engaged, but it also comes down to those stipends. You need to be able to track that. There is definitely going to be times where, those stipend amounts are going to be checked based on their instructional hours. So if you can't back that up, it's going to kind of create some compliance issues. So you want to make sure whenever those participants are in the classroom, even if it's an online classroom, there is documentation of how many hours they are actually receiving instruction. So good question. Mike, I think I might have addressed that just in my last statement, but if you have more questions about it, we can definitely take that offline. But yeah, I mean, you need to have documentation of who is in the room, how many hours they're in the room, because otherwise you're not going to know how to pay out those stipends. You're not going to be able to verify those hours. So let's move on to our next slide here. So we're talking about ADA requirements. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. So the Illinois Works programs are ethically and legally responsible for adhering to administrative requirements according to the ADA. So your program must have a designated ADA coordinator, provide public notice, have an established grievance policy, and conduct a self-evaluation. So and then also develop a transition plan regarding accessibility. So this is something that many of you likely already have through your organizations or something you've integrated into your systems already. So as part of our diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, we also really want to make sure that we are kind of open to all Illinoisans. That is the point of this program. And so it might create some accommodations that come up, but we do require that all of our programs are in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So before we move on to our next section, which is actually going to be run by Dr. Gia Suggs, are there any additional questions that I can answer right now?
So far, no questions in the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, of course, if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. You can also reach out to us after the session if you have any questions kind of percolate after. But for now, let me go ahead and hand it off to Dr. Gia.
Thank you, Christine. And we are going to move forward to the next section, Section 7, Training, Instruction, and Certifications. So by the end of this session, you will be able to, and we've got a really good list here, explain training expectations within the scope of Illinois Works, deliver an effective program orientation, utilize tools including the career assessment and commitment agreement, comply with the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship curriculum requirements, consider additional certifications and training modules that might be relevant to your target audience, apply the Illinois Essentials Employability Skills Framework to your program's instructional hours, incorporate diverse training modalities, and utilize best practices to evaluate the curriculum. So that's quite a bit, but we're going to move through this. Again, in your grantee manual, this is section 7, starting on page 100, particularly if you are following along. And this is where training is located within our pre-apprenticeship life cycle. So you were chosen for this particular grant because you successfully demonstrated your ability to provide pre-apprenticeship training and to prepare program participants for employment in the construction industry. Program instruction is the central tool used to implement the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program. During instruction is when you train, prepare, and empower participants for a successful career in the building trades and construction. I want to take a second here and differentiate between how Illinois Works sees training as opposed to teaching. So training is a process that aims to increase knowledge, develop skills, impact attitude, or influence behaviors. So anytime you have individuals in the room, that's an opportunity to do one or more of those things. Training is often focused on the business goals, which is driven by time-critical business skills and knowledge. The goal of training is to improve or impact performance. This is an important distinction from teaching, which focuses on information dissemination, knowledge acquisition, and learning. So training has its kind of his historical context or its ideology in teaching. And teaching is about learning, knowledge acquisition, making people smarter. It is about the value of knowledge acquisition in and of itself. Training, on the other hand, is a little bit different. The goal of training is to connect skills and competencies to business goals. And so the reason why this is important is because this is actually a training program. What they are learning in your program should be specific to connect them to performance outcomes that would be expected on the job, not just models or learning for the sake of just attaining more information. So in light of that, training, particularly in the pre-apprenticeship program, should be what we call experiential training or experiential learning. Your program is expected to offer experiential training, also known as development by doing. Words that may be synonymous with experiential training that you might be familiar with are work-based learning or small group work labs, on-the-job training, or even practicums. How does that look in your classroom? So there are two expectations. The first is the construction laboratory. This is a facility that provides controlled conditions. Typically, it may be on site where you kind of have a simulated construction lab in which participants can practice a task or a skill. And then there's the job site location. This is a location or area where construction work is taking place. Note, job sites are not controlled like the construction laboratories. So these are the two experiences that Illinois Works expects you to incorporate into your program. The construction laboratory, which might be at one of your locations, or the job site location, which may be a real world construction site where students are going to learn. So I'm going to go through this section quickly here, but I want to make a note that we will have a subsequent session that focuses on curriculum, instruction, and training expectations within the next month or so, which you, your instructors, and anyone who is connected to the actual delivery of training will be able to attend. And we'll take deeper dives into a lot of these, but at a high level, these are really the important points we want to make sure you leave with by the end of this training. The important thing is to stay in scope. So what does that mean to stay in scope? So it is critically important that your program stays within the scope of what is considered construction hours or construction training hours. At a minimum, your program should be 150 hours, but you also want to be mindful not to exceed 300 hours unless you submit that in your curriculum, acknowledge that you know you're going over, explain why you are exceeding the 300 hours, and then that would need to be approved by Illinois Works. The overarching focus of the Illinois Works apprenticeship program, pre-apprenticeship program, is to fund programs that target underrepresented populations and successfully transition them into pre-apprenticeship programs in the construction and building trades. Illinois Work Funds should be used within the scope of this goal. Again, minimum 150 instruction hours, maximum 300 instruction hours, unless you've received approval to exceed those 300 hours. So what is required? What is required is an Illinois Works grantee orientation, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And then we have a list of required certifications. So you can choose between NAP2, NCCER, ICCB, or other approved and nationally recognized and approved curriculum. So if you're using NAP2, NCCE, or ICCB, those are already approved. However, if you're interested in delivering a different curriculum and it is nationally recognized, you can submit that for approval in your curriculum. You must also offer OSHA 10, and you must also offer first aid and CPR. So those are all required, and your participants should matriculate out of your program with a certificate for each one of those. Other criteria include the Illinois Works Essential Employability Framework, which is employability skills, which I'll talk about in a second. And we just talked about experiential learning. So that's also kind of synonymous with the term work-based learning. So where they're taking what they've learned in your classroom and they're able to apply that in a real world scenario. So I'm going to pause there for a quick second and ask Fairly, are there any questions about the required instruction so far?
So far, no questions in the chat, Gia.
Okay, awesome. So when we talk about those 150 instruction hours, or 150 to 300 instruction hours that are required, there are a couple things that fit within that 150 to 300 hours, and there are some things that do not fit. So we want to clarify what is actually a part of those hours and what is not a part of those hours. And I want to start with the program orientation. The orientation is required instruction. However, it is not a part of those 150 to 300 instruction hours. You can hold your orientation at the first day that they will then start instruction, or you can hold it prior to that. But you must have an orientation. However, that is not a part of your 150 to 300 instruction hours. Other things that are considered out of scope: wraparound services, student support services, transition services, follow-up activities. These are all things that must be included in your program, but wouldn't be considered instructional hours. Other things that I think sometimes people might perceive as being a part of instructional hours, but we want to clarify that they are not. complementary education. So this is a construction and building trades training program. So if someone is earning their GED, that is not considered instruction hours. Now that might be a part of the student support services to help prepare them to be successful in the building trades and to matriculate into a DOL apprenticeship program. But that's not considered instruction hours. ACT preparatory training, so any type of post-education preparatory training would not be considered instructional hours. And things like going to college fairs and things like that would be out of scope for what is considered instruction. So let's talk a little bit about orientation. So Christine talked about building rapport. And building rapport is one of the most critical things you can do to help students feel a sense of connection and belonging. So why is it important, other than intrinsically, for students to feel a sense of connection and belonging? Students who are connected and feel a sense of belonging are more likely to successfully complete the program, are more likely to respond favorably to participation surveys, and if your students feel a sense of connection and belonging, they're less likely to you'll see less turnover in your program. So there's a correlation to feeling a sense of connection and program attrition. So you will retain your students if they feel connected to your program. Orientation is an opportunity to initially establish that sense of belonging and connection. So orientation is a time frame after program acceptance and before the start of your program. It is highly recommended that orientation occurs on a designated day prior to or during the participant's first day that training will also start. It is important that programs develop an orientation agenda that allocates enough time to cover the required topics. The agenda should be communicated to participants prior to their session. The goal is to create interest, to set expectations, that attending the orientation so attending the orientation should be one of your program requirements. You are certainly free to construct an agenda. What I will say is we also provide one for you. So in your 2023 Grantee Manual, template 16, which is in the appendix, is a sample agenda that you can use for your program. So I have to refrain from not taking a deeper dive into the orientation here because I want to be respectful of the time. And we will take a deeper dive into orientation during the session that we have that's going to be focused exclusively on training curriculum and instruction. But just be mindful that this is a requirement. They have to attend. And of course, it is up to you all to create an experience that helps manage their expectations for the program and feel a sense of connection and belonging, that they're doing something that's going to be good for them to do and that they're going to appreciate having made the decision to be a part of your pre-apprenticeship program. During the orientation, they will be required to complete a career assessment. So this is just a tip. Sometimes orientation is designed kind of in a theater style where you have all the chairs perhaps straight or kind of in a U shape, and then the person who is speaking is up front. Part of what will be required is they complete a career assessment. So be mindful as you are reserving room or allocating space that if there are certain parts of your instruction where you have the theater seating, that you may need to have another space where there is a tabletop, because the first career assessment is paper and pen, and they have to be able to complete that on a tabletop during your orientation. So the career assessment tool captures key information regarding the participant's career readiness, their primary and secondary career goals, and their anticipated timeline for transitioning to a career once they have completed the program. During orientation, this assessment should be completed by each participant in a group setting using a hard copy version of the assessment. There is a hard copy version of the assessment available for you In the 2023 Grantee Manual, it is Exhibit 5 and it is available in the appendix. So based on the participants' stated goals and in their career assessment, academic support staff and instructors must work together to develop a personalized action plan tailored to the specific needs of each participant. So because they are completing this, at least the first completion, there'll be a second completion, which we'll address later. But because this first completion is on paper and pen or paper and pencil, the career assessment must be entered into the Illinois Works reporting system within 24 hours after the participants completed during the orientation. And a staff build out of the career plan for each participant will then be generated. The career assessment is available on the intake tab of each participant's IWRS profile. Now, if you were a part of the IWRS training with us, the first session, that might sound familiar to you. But if it sounds foreign, no worries. We do have subsequent IWRS training that's scheduled that is currently a part of your onboarding. So if you are being mindful and you have registered for all the onboarding sessions, you will be in the IWRS session that will talk about that intake tab and the IWRS profile for each of the participants. In addition, participants must sign a commitment agreement. The Pre-Apprenticeship Training Program Commitment Agreement is a written agreement between the participants and your program that clarifies the participants' rights, obligations, and the pre-apprenticeship training conditions. Signed commitment agreements must be uploaded to IWRS for each of the participants in your cohort. Again, in the subsequent IWRS training, we will talk about how to do that. What's important to note is that this agreement serves as the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act waiver, a federal law that affords participants who are 18 years or older or who have entered a post-secondary institution, and that could be at any age, the right to have control over the disclosure of personal information identifiable from their educational records. We are asking participants to actually waive this agreement. The reason why we are asking them to waive it is because their data is necessary for us to be able to communicate what we're required to communicate to state government around the progress of participants who are participating in this pre-apprenticeship program. Without this signed agreement, then they've not consented to the waiver. And if they've not consented to the waiver, then we can't track their information in our reporting system, which is IWRS. Important note, an unwillingness of the participants to sign this commitment agreement or share their information, which is their records, then this will automatically disqualify them from being a participant in your program. Any questions about the initial assessment, career assessment, or the commitment agreement before we keep going?
So far, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay, awesome. So we've already talked about the pre-apprenticeship required, content. NAP2, NCCER, ICCB, or other approved program, the OSHA 10, CPR, and first aid. So then the next question is likely, how then might we get to those 300 instruction hours if this is the baseline of what's required? So really, this is about the needs of your program participants. So given the needs of your program participants, their craft areas of interest, and their post-program goals, additional certifications might be relevant for them. Again, these are not required, but certainly an opportunity if, particularly during the career assessment, you learn that that their career goals might require additional support for them. So some things that could be included, and you all have already mentioned some of this. So the construction and building trades math, test taking skills, the Flaggart certification. So this is what I will say, because we do have some programs who are offering that Flaggart certification. But what I would say about the Flaggart certification, because our director requires that if we include this on this slide, we include this caveat, is that the Flaggart certification in the past has been historically targeted toward women who are interested in the construction and building trade. And this particular certification, though relevant and important, actually is lower on the pay scale. And so we are cautioning all programs that the women in the program are not directed toward Flaggart certification or Flaggart work, because part of this is around equity. So I just want to make sure I have pointed out that caveat. Employability skills. Here's what we know around employability skills. The skill to physically do the work can certainly be taught. However, if individuals cannot be on site and work well with other team members in a way that allows everyone to achieve their goals, then they're not going to be successful in that environment. And so sometimes individuals are trained really well and they have the skills, and here's like the buzzword that you hear from a lot of employers: oh, they don't feel like they're a fit. And when you hear that kind of buzzword, oh, they may not be a fit, that's really about employability skills. That's really about their ability to be able to connect and partner with the other individuals that they will be working with. And so that is part of your program's responsibility to make sure they have those employability skills. And we'll talk about some of the recommended employability skills trainings in just a second. And then, of course, diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity. Regarding employability skills, I do want to state and define clearly that the employability skills provide a standard for the state of Illinois. So we are leveraging their recommended employability skills. And when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, what might be some relevant sessions that might serve your participants? So that might include discrimination in the workplace, making sure that participants understand their legal rights, sexism within workplaces, so how to navigate environments that may not have historically welcomed women into that work, bullying and harassment. We do have one of the groups who offer a class called Construction and Trades from a Gender Lens. And so they actually go through the kind of the historical context around women in construction and the building trades. And then similarly, construction and trades through the lens of people of color. Any questions about that before we keep going?
No questions in the chat so far, Chia.
Okay. All right. So I want to spend a few seconds here talking about curricula approval. Your program must submit their pre-apprenticeship curriculum for approval prior to implementation. The Illinois Works curriculum approval process has two components. First, the submission of the final curriculum form, and the final curriculum form is Exhibit 10 in the appendix of your pre-apprenticeship grantee manual. And then the approved curriculum will be entered into the Illinois Works reporting system. So the final curriculum form is generated by Illinois Works. The form will be sent to the program administrators and is used to confirm training services, titles, hours, modules, student evaluations, post-assessment performance tests, which Christine talked about in the previous module. And the curriculum allows Illinois Works to see that all of those components are included in your curriculum and is compliant with the Illinois Works Job Act, which governs this program. Once your curriculum is approved, your grant manager will upload a copy of the form into the grantee's provider info page in IWRS. Again, if you were at the IWRS session, the first one that was facilitated, that probably sounds familiar. If not, please connect with your grantee manual for more information around how to access your approved curriculum. After adding training services to the Grantees Provider info page, the Illinois Works Grant Manager will send a signed copy of the final curriculum form to the grantee. So that is how you will know this is approved. If you would like a copy of the sample Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program curriculum, it is available for you in template 17 in your grantee manual. And again, in upcoming sessions over the next couple of weeks, there'll be an opportunity to do more practice in IWRS. Another pause. Any questions? Okay. So now I want to take a second here and just address the last topic that we are presenting for the training module in this particular course. Keeping in mind there will be another session where we will take a deeper dive into all of these topics and a few additional topics. But the 2023 Grantee Manual, you will find that there are additional sections on training modalities, instructional planning, and training evaluation. Again, it's available for you in the Grantee Manual, but we will also cover those pieces in the next session around curriculum and instruction. But here's what's important for you to know now. Instructional evaluations are a required component of the program. Illinois Works leverages the Kirkpatrick model for training evaluation. So do me a favor, because if, those who have been kind of training construction for a while, this concept is not new, but if you all can kind of do like a hand raise or something, how many of you are familiar with the Kirkpatrick model for training evaluation? Yep, Greg, thank you. Anyone else heard of this? Of course, Christine, I know you have. Yes, others? Suzette, yes. Okay, a few people. Okay, so the Kirkpatrick level 4 evaluation, there are 4 levels, and I'll just quickly kind of define them for you. So the first one is what we call the smiley face. So that's basically, did they like it? Was the room comfortable? Were the materials easy to understand? I think everybody here has at least completed a smiley face evaluation. That's actually what we do at the end of our sessions. It's considered that level 1 evaluation. Did they like the experience? Level 2, most people are familiar with, is that pre and post test, or sometimes it's just post test. But essentially, what we're doing is assessing how much knowledge has been gained. So, what is the increase in knowledge prior to instruction and then after instruction? Level 3 measures actual behavior change. So how are we impacting behavior? And level 4, this gets a little like return on investment, long-term impact. So let me explain the expectations here around these. Level 1 is not required, but it is highly recommended. Level 2, that knowledge acquisition. Do they know more after your instruction than they knew before your instruction? That is required. Level 3 is not required. And level 4 is required. However, Illinois Works is partnering with NIU and is taking the initiative around that. We just need your support and participation. So we will talk about this in the next, in this session 3 for the grantee manual, but we will be facilitating a longitudinal study that will allow us to do a level 4 evaluation, which is connected to a lot of the follow-up that you will be required to do, which you will learn about during this session. In addition to the Illinois Works criteria, depending on your certifying body, they will also have evaluation expectations. Illinois Works evaluation expectations do not negate the certifying body's expectations. you are accountable for both and. So Illinois Works is requiring a level 2, then you have to do a level 2. However, if your certifying body, let's say ICCB, requires a level 1, then you are required to do a level 1 as well as a level 2. I also want to note here that on table 17, we're trying, this is a lot of information, so we're trying to be as helpful as possible to um, create tools that will make this information easy to access and digest. So we do have this table, and it outlines when there is a built-in evaluation or if there is a evaluation creation requirement. So that means you have to create the tool. When we do the more extensive session, we will talk about how to create a reliable evaluation tool based on the Kirkpatrick model of evaluation. That's all a mouthful. Questions?
There's still no questions in the chat, Gia.
All right.
Oh, I have one. It just popped in. It
Yeah.
says, Gia, if level 2 and 4 are required for ICCB as an example, we should have to evaluate 1, 2, and 4.
Okay, let me see if I understand that question. If level 2 is required for let's say for ICCB. So ICCB requires level 1. Illinois Works requires level 2. So your program would be required to create a level 2 evaluation for each of the modules in ICCB and any of the other instruction that you are providing. Level 4 requires that you comply with follow-up expectations, and then our partnership with NIU will facilitate that longitudinal study, which is a level 4. So as long as you're doing the required follow-up, then you are supporting level 4. But if we're talking specifically ICCB requires a level 1, and they provide you with that level 1. So you don't have to create it. They're going to give it to you. Illinois Works requires a level 2. So because they don't provide it, you will have to create a level 2, but we are going to talk about how to do that. And then level 3, as long as you are doing your follow-up activities and you are entering that information into IWRS, you will be supporting the level 4 evaluation. Does that answer the question?
Yes, he said understood and thank you.
No, no problem. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to pause there and turn it over to the next presenter. Is Dr. Ruano on? Let me check because I can't see all the faces here yet. Okay. Well, let's do just a 5-minute quick break. And then we will check in with the other facilitators. And so you guys get an extra few-minute break here, and we will see you guys shortly. Let me check the time. It is 11:59. So if we do 5 minutes, that will take us to 12:05. All right, let's do a 5-minute break. And I'm going to hang out here in case anyone actually has an additional question around training and development. So I am available during the break if you have additional questions. You can either unmute to have a conversation or you can put it in the chat. Okay, everyone, welcome back. It is my pleasure to now turn it over to Deputy Director Dr. Ruano, who will facilitate the last session of the training. Dr. Ruano.
Thank you very much, Gia. Thanks again for joining us today. Before we start to discuss the last section that we're covering today, which is Section 8 of the Grantee Manual, which deals with program completion, transition services, and follow-up, I wanted to just remind you that Illinois Works is a semi-structured pre-apprenticeship program system. And as a result, you have noticed throughout this session and last week's session that we have provided very particular guidance related to various items that need to be completed. We organize that guidance in a model called the pre-apprentice life cycle, which you will find throughout the whole 2023 Grantee Manual. So it's very important that you really understand what that guidance is, make sure that as you execute your program, that guidance is being followed. Our grant managers, when they do compliance checking every month, they will be checking to ensure that you're following that guidance as you enter information in our system in order for us to have a successful program. So I just wanted to put that out there. In this particular section, you will notice in the grantee manual, each of the sections of the grantee manual have a section overview. This particular one addresses program completion definitions, the utilization of the career assessment, describes transition staff responsibility, articulates expected outcomes and deliverables, provides transition and follow-up services, identifies active follow-up versus long-term follow-up, and also integrates DIBE, which we covered in the last webinar we did, in the 6 core values into the all elements of your program's transition services and follow-up activities. So again, going into section 8 of the 2023 Grantee Manual, that's where you will find all of this guidance. Program completion, transition services, and follow-up, all of these, all stages of the pre-apprentice life cycle are essential to participants' success. However, it's very important to emphasize that program completion, transition services, and follow-up are the stages of the program that allows you to start measuring your impact. So there are a variety of things, different steps you have taken in this program now, and these 3 stages at the end of the life cycle. That's where you can really see the impact that your program is going to have. Let's start with program completion. So program completion refers to the conclusion of training and the beginning of transition services. For most participants, program completion will mark the end of their training experience with your program, and again will begin the transition to a DOL registered apprenticeship program. And I want to emphasize that we will circle back soon about this, but the main point, the main reason for the existence of the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program is for individuals to successfully complete their programs, and then the primary goal is to transition to DOL registered apprenticeship programs. That is the main goal that we have for this program. I'll come back to that in a few minutes, but there are 4 statuses available to you in Illinois Works related to individual participants. Once they went through your program, these are the 4 statuses that you will have to choose for a particular individual. The first one is successful completion. This occurs when the participant has met all program requirements. You already heard today about, and also last time about attendance requirements, about certification requirements. All of those requirements must be met for participants to be considered a successful completer. Some may refer to this as program graduation. This marks participants' completion of classroom, construction lab, worksite training, and recognizes their attainment of required certifications. There are some programs that choose to do formal graduation ceremonies for their graduates. We encourage those. We don't require those. We encourage them because for a lot of these individuals, this may be one of the few times when they graduate from anything. So if you are able to do formal graduation ceremonies, it's definitely great. It's a great practice. If you are not able to do it, or your organization does not do those types of events, that's fine. If you do decide to do those events, please do not hesitate to let us know about when those events are taking place. We are always glad to go out to programs wherever you're located to visit and attend those events. I particularly like to be able to see who we're serving, their families, and meet them face to face. Being able to see numbers and data and names is good, but being able to actually meet human beings is actually even better. The other status that is available to you is unsuccessful completion. Some participants may be present throughout the program but are unable to graduate because they may have additional services or tasks to complete. That may include makeup exams or makeup sessions, among others. Um, they need to be able to complete those to satisfy program graduation requirements. So as a result, they are considered an unsuccessful completer. Student support services coordinators, which is one of the roles that we expect for programs to have, must create an action plan for successful completion for each participant. There are times when individuals go through situations and they're not able to successfully complete the program. They may be missing 20 hours or 30 hours, or maybe they didn't get one of their certifications. It is possible to include the participants that are in that situation in your next cohort. So I would encourage you to make sure that those individuals that didn't successfully complete, you create an action plan for successful completion. Bring them back in the next cohort. If they're missing hours in certain modules, bring them back to those modules. If they're missing certifications, make sure they go through the requirements to complete those. Uh, you should continue the engagement with those individuals to ensure that they can return and successfully complete your program. It's important to keep in mind that they need to be able to complete those program requirements within 1 calendar year from their initial program completion. So you only have 1 year to be able to bring them back and make sure that they complete. The other status that's available to you for individuals that start your program is withdrawal. Some participants may choose to withdraw from the program for whatever reason. Before a participant withdrawal is finalized, the student support services coordinator should meet with the participant one-on-one to determine if there are any wraparound services or student support services that can be offered to keep the participant from withdrawing. In some circumstances, additional support may help the participant change their decision to withdraw. However, that's not always the case, and grantees should seek to maintain a positive relationship with the participant, regardless of the participant's final decision. Sometimes individuals go through particular situations related to health of a loved one, very particular life situations that really gets in the way of them completing the program. It's important that if they have to withdraw, that you maintain that relationship, maintain contact with them so that they can hopefully be re-engaged in the future. If they choose to withdraw, you have to conduct it. This is a requirement, an exit interview using the exit interview questionnaire. That's Exhibit 1 of the grantee manual. This is an opportunity to gain an evaluation of the program overall, key components, and seek participant feedback. As the participant, if follow-up contacts are welcome, there may be future opportunity to engage them. So here we want to emphasize is the engagement. If someone needs to withdraw, make sure that we try to provide as many services they may need to prevent the withdrawal. But if they do withdraw, you need to fill out an exit interview. The exit interview is done hard copy, and it needs to be kept in the student's file and uploaded into IWRS. The other status available to you is dismissal. This occurs when participants fail to comply with the terms of their commitment agreement or violate program policies. You need to maintain, it's a requirement that you maintain a dismissal policy that outlines a standard procedure for how, when, and why participants can be dismissed. This is very important. It's a very important requirement. In fact, there'll be a time when your grant manager will reach out to you and say, can we please take a look at your dismissal policy? Because it's important that we're following standardized processes and procedures, particularly when we dismiss individuals from our programs. Once a participant is dismissed, all services from Illinois Works must be terminated through the IWRS system. A copy of the dismissal letter must be saved in the participant's file and uploaded into IWRS. So again, it's a requirement that you have a dismissal policy, and also when you dismiss someone, that there's a letter that gets issued about the dismissal to that individual, and that communication, that letter needs to be uploaded into IWRS. Again, program completion refers to the conclusion of training and the beginning of transition services. It's important to keep in mind that when we're doing compliance, monthly compliance, a participant who's considered an unsuccessful complete or a withdrawal or a dismissal are viewed as incomplete in our system. They're not considered completers, they're viewed as incompletes. Let us move on now to the next stage in the pre-apprentice life cycle, which is transition services. And before we talk about transition services, I want to mention something that is very important, and it has to do with the participant satisfaction survey. In keeping with the Illinois Works focus on continuous program improvement, both at the grantee and the network level, all pre-apprenticeship program participants who remain engaged in the program through the end of instruction, even if they did not successfully complete the program, will be asked to provide feedback on their program experience through a participant satisfaction survey. This survey is a requirement, and grantees need to ensure that all their participants take it. Again, this is a very important component of our continuous program improvement, our evaluation methodology. It's a participant satisfaction survey. Participant satisfaction survey information was first introduced to you on Section 8, page 134 of the Grantee Manual. The participant satisfaction survey was developed by the Illinois Works staff in partnership with the Center for Government Studies at Northern Illinois University, and it will be an integral part of the program evaluation process. We will be talking again in a few minutes, a little more details about how our evaluation process works, but this survey is a very important survey. In addition to the guidance provided on page 134 of the Grantee Manual, you can find more information related to the participant satisfaction survey on page 185 of this section. So transition services are a series of career readiness activities that serve as the final step for participants before progressing to a registered apprenticeship program and employment. So these are some of the most vital services that you can provide, besides ensuring that you recruit them, besides ensuring that you provide wraparound services, student support services. Providing transition services is really where the rubber meets the road for the future success of our participants and for the success of your program. Once participants have successfully completed the instructional pieces of the program, they should begin transition services guided by a transition plan they help develop with the transitions coordinator and based on their career assessment and the career assessment they completed. So you need to create a transition plan for each of the participants. A transition plan for a particular individual is going to look different than the transition plan for another individual. It may be that one individual wants to be an electrician and another one wants to be a carpenter. It may be that once they take this pre-transition career assessment, they indicate that they don't want to go into construction anymore, that instead they want to be a nurse, or instead they want to go into the military. And that is all fine if they change their minds. But that will impact the transition plan that you create. It's going to be looking very differently for different populations. One important thing to emphasize here, and I'll say it here and I will continue to say it throughout the year, transition services should actually start way in advance. If you start transition services once people complete your program, you are very late in the process. In our system, transition services actually start when they fill out the career assessment and orientation. That's when you need to start working with them, setting up everything that they need so that by the time they finish your program, you already have the infrastructure in place, the pathways in place, the relationships in place, so that they can then successfully transition. If that is not done early on, we run the risk of not being successful at doing transitioning. One key thing to keep in mind is that your staff that's going to be in charge of transitioning, your transition coordinator, should already be in place, and you should have someone already dedicated to doing that work. We recommend that you have one person that is fully dedicated to doing that work. The funding level that we're providing is high enough for you to be able to do that. We are finding nowadays that a lot of programs that do not appropriately staff are leaving a lot of money on the table with Illinois Works. They're not using all of their grant money because they didn't staff sufficiently enough in order to execute all of these requirements. The first step in the transition process is to conduct a pre-transition career assessment. This is the foundation for the participant's transition plan, which includes facilitating job readiness sessions, including resume writing, interview preparation, among others. This career plan outlines the traits of interest and participant job readiness needs. The plan is created in IWRS, and participants will have access to it. This plan also assists transition staff as they help participants move from pre-apprentice trainees to full apprentices. So let's talk a little bit about this pre-transition career assessment. 3 to 4 weeks prior to the end of training, the pre-transition career assessment must be completed. The transition service coordinator is expected to meet one-on-one with each participant to complete their career assessment. This assessment will mirror the one completed during orientation, but unlike the original assessment, which was used to guide training experiences, the goal of this assessment is to help staff build a transition plan. This assessment will be completed directly in IWRS on the intake referral screen during the one-on-one meeting with the participant. You may remember that we mentioned that when you do orientation, they have to do a career assessment. That career assessment is done in a group setting, and it's a hard copy assessment. You may ask, why is it that we have to do 2 career assessments? What we have found through years of experience is that people tend to change their minds. From the time they start a program to the time they end a program, they may change their minds. They may no longer want to be a carpenter. They now may want to be, an electrician. They may now want to be an operator or maybe a laborer instead of being a plumber. So that's the reason why we do 2 career assessments, to see if there are any changes in their career plan, so that when you do transitioning services and you create a transition plan, you're actually using the latest and most updated career information from the participants. So again, this assessment, the second assessment, is completed online in a one-on-one meeting. This is not a group setting. This is a one-on-one meeting with the particular participant, and it's completed online, and you base your transition plan on that information. So as I mentioned, you could provide a variety of career services and transition services. We encourage you to be as creative and as comprehensive as possible. And you will need to set up those services in IWRS, and those services may include career information, resume building and resume writing, interview preparation, assistance with completing apprenticeship program applications, job assistance in case they need to find a job now while they wait to see if they get accepted to a DOL register apprenticeship program. They may need job search assistance for other jobs that they may want because they no longer want to go into construction. Some of them may want to start their own business. You may need to help them with that and refer them to programs that do that for them. Some of them may want to go to a community college to be a nurse, to be, engineering assistant. So you may have to refer them to a community college and other colleges in your area. Some of them may just want employment in a different field. So as a result, you may have to work with the American Job Centers in your community or work with other partners, employer partners in your community. At the end of the day, what's really important here is that we want to make sure that the services that we're offering are as comprehensive as possible. Gia, I'm going to skip the next activity and move on to expected outcomes and deliverables. So that's when it comes to the transition services. I want to emphasize, I mentioned earlier about the primary goal of Illinois Works, and I want to emphasize that now. training staff, transition staff have a significant influence on helping their programs achieve their primary outcomes. By the end of the contract period, your program is expected to meet the following deliverables as outlined in your grantee agreement. First, at least 85% of enrolled participants must successfully complete the program, which includes securing their certifications. That's the first metric in the Illinois Work system, is what we call a completion metric. At least 85% of enrolled participants, okay? At least 70% of enrolled participants must transition to a DOL registered apprenticeship program. This is what we call a primary goal. Now, all of these two metrics, the completion one and the transition one, is part of your program contract with specific participant metrics. Once you receive your contract, you will see these on your contract. And it's important that if you have any questions at that time, that you reach out to the grant manager at Illinois Works so that he or she can answer your questions. Once participants transition to registered apprenticeship programs, or in some cases, secondary transitions, the transition coordinator will be responsible for conducting participant follow-up. So participant follow-up is the last stage in the pre-apprentice life cycle, and I will address now. I want to mention also secondary transitions. Our primary focus again is transitioning individuals to DOL registered apprenticeship programs. It may be possible that individuals change their minds or that they're not able to enter a DOL registered apprenticeship program, but you do help them secure a secondary transition. And for us, a secondary transition is going to a higher level training program, going to a community college, finding employment in some other sector. You will get credit in your compliance for secondary transitions. However, the credit that we provide for secondary transitions are not at the same level of the credits that we provide for primary transitions. In fact, a secondary transition carries only a 50% credit in comparison to primary transition. So it's very important, again, that your staff and your program machinery is completely focused on ensuring that you achieve that primary goal, which is transitioning to DOL registered apprenticeship programs. So now to discuss follow-up. Follow-up, again, is the last stage of the pre-apprentice life cycle. And this, just like the other ones that we just discussed, completion, transition, follow-up is fundamental for our particular perspective in Illinois Works. The final step of the pre-apprentice life cycle is follow-up, and programs are required to conduct follow-up activities for up to 1 year after a participant exits the program. So you need to do this follow-up for up to 1 year. We're actually, through our evaluation methodology, tracking individuals for up to 10 years. However, after the 1 year that you do, our partners at Northern Illinois University will continue to do a follow-up through the 10th year, doing data matching and other mechanisms, other methods to be able to get information from our grantees, our participants. This step provides you with the opportunity to build a robust alumni network and to maintain a connection with the participants, and more importantly, to collect outcome and employment data. Additionally, the Illinois Works Network can begin to build data-driven best practices based on long-term data collection. That goes to speak about the evaluation that I just mentioned, and I will mention that in a little bit more detail in a minute. Program follow-up is essential. It's an essential part of the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program. There are many ways to regularly stay in touch with program graduates. You can do surveys, you can do focus groups, you can do phone conversations, you can do text, you can do social media posts, email, visits. There are a variety of ways that you can stay connected with your graduates, and it's very important that you do so. One thing that is important to emphasize is the 1 year follow-up that I just mentioned, that it's a requirement of your program. So active follow-up denotes a contact between the transition service coordinator. Again, this is a person that works for you doing transitions, and a program alum on a quarterly basis for 1 year following program completion. So when they complete your program and start going into these transition stages, you need to follow up with your graduates on a quarterly basis, and it needs to be active follow-up, meaning you are actually communicating with them. A follow-up is a contact between transition staff and program alumni on a quarterly basis for 1 year. The follow-up questions are guided by whether an alum is pursuing a registered apprenticeship program or not. Um, you will find out that during this follow-up, you need to use a questionnaire that is available in IWRS. And as you pull up that questionnaire and questions get asked, the questionnaire will change depending if the person transitioned to a DOL registered apprenticeship program or if they're doing other things. The first year is also very important because it may be the most vulnerable when apprentices are more likely to drop out of apprenticeship programs. So if you were successful at transitioning them to an apprenticeship program, that's when they're most vulnerable. Again, the questionnaire is available in IWRS, and the data that you produce through these questionnaires will be used by our team and also the team at Northern Illinois University for our evaluation methodology. In terms of follow-up services, there are two main functions that you can execute by doing these follow-ups. One is follow-up services are used for reporting and tracking program and participant data. So when you do the follow-up, you're helping us with that. Illinois Works follow-up process is non-traditional and will become part of a longitudinal study to measure program goals and participant outcomes for up to 10 years. Maintaining contact with cohort participants is crucial for the longitudinal study. Therefore, follow-up staff must have the skills to enhance participants' desire to participate, reflect the importance of the study, and demonstrate enthusiasm and commitment to the study. It's very important that this is not done as an afterthought, but it is done in a very proactive way in order for us to get that information. You can find more information about our evaluation methodology and longitudinal study on section 12 of the Grantee manual. The second thing that we achieve by doing these follow-up services is that follow-up services and activities after the apprenticeship and or employment placement facilitate further development and boost retention. These follow-up services are an essential and integral part of comprehensive longer-term goal to simultaneously promote participants' economic independence and economic development in the state of Illinois. What we have found is that when you provide these type of or do these follow-up services, you could actually support people's success even after they finish your program. So some of the follow-up services that you can provide and that we encourage you to provide is referral to community resources. The participant may need to be referred to community programs to assist them in meeting needs that have been identified that cannot be met by other follow-up services. So maybe when you talk to them, you found out that they need some services that you don't provide and you need to refer them out to somewhere else to help them out. Tracking progress in the apprenticeship program in or the job where they would place. The process through which staff track a participant's progress as a new apprentice or on the job and identify any individual follow-up services that may be required or beneficial for the participant in completing an apprenticeship program, retaining employment, and or progressing further in the construction industry. Maybe you find out that they don't have transportation services and they're having a hard time going to work or attending a DO registered apprenticeship program, and there may be something you can do about it. Apprenticeship and work-related peer support groups, a group activity guided by a follow-up staff member where participants meet to solve issues related to construction apprenticeship and on-the-job situations. Maybe you find out that they're struggling at the job site and that they need some support. Create support groups to help them with that. Assistance with apprenticeship and work-related problems, working with the participant and the apprenticeship sponsor or employer to resolve problems to assist the participant in successfully completing their program. So there are a variety of things that you could do, that we can do for our graduates if we conduct these follow-up activities, and that's the reason why it's so important to do so. The other thing that is important to emphasize is that when you do this follow-up, there is information that you're going to find out about the individual that you may need in order to update the applicant tracking system. You will be trained in future webinars on how to use our applicant tracking system, but this is the system. It's an online database that connects Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program graduates with contractors delivering state capital projects. This database is only as good as the information entered into the system and should be accurate to facilitate graduate transitions into registered apprenticeship programs and employment. Participant profiles must be updated on at least a quarterly basis while an active tracking questionnaire is completed. So when you complete those questionnaires, you find out they changed their address, their email address, their phone number. You need to go and update the ATS. And again, as I said, we're going to train you soon in the near future on how to use the ATS to profile your graduates. Any questions before we proceed to finalize this webinar? I know we're at 12:35, running a few minutes late, but any questions that you may have, we do want to make sure that you participate in the evaluation of the webinar as we use that information to improve our delivery of training and professional development activities to all of you, our grantees and our partners. Any questions, Vera Lee, in the chat?
No questions.
Okay, great. So moving on, I'm gonna now pass it on to Dr. Gia Suggs, who will conduct the end of webinar evaluation, and then we'll also close this webinar. I appreciate you once again attending this webinar, and I thank you for being with us today. Go ahead, Gia.
All right, Norman, thank you so much. And everyone, if you could, I can see that the information has been put in the chat for Mentimeter. So Dan, thank you for doing that. If you have logged out, please be sure to log back in so we can do our really quick evaluation. All right, first question. Please share your views on this training by reading the following statements, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. Next question. This course was relevant to what I wanted to learn about the subject matter. All right, I plan to apply what I learned. All right, just a few more questions here. What improvements might you recommend? Okay, thank you. Great, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. There will definitely be more IWRS hands-on training. So if I am not mistaken for your onboarding track, that should be next week. Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. And we appreciate you acknowledging that. Okay, what did you find effective? So if we continue to make changes, and we do consistently make changes, what is it that we should absolutely keep? Yes, thank you. Any other thoughts? We can definitely continue to include multiple presenters. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is helpful. Thank you. Okay, last question. Is there anything else we need to know that we did not think to inquire about? Okay. Okay, there are a couple notes here around childcare assistance and agency collaboration. I want to encourage you to connect with your grantee manager around specific support in these areas. And we will have there will be networking sessions coming up. So we have incorporated some networking opportunities within our regional meetings. So that will be a future opportunity. Thank you. Okay. We might be able to, and Christine, if you can help me make a mental note, but to do a demonstration of the intake process when we do the IWRS.
I love that idea.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, awesome. Thank you all so very much. We appreciate your time, attention, and participation, and we look forward to spending time with you in the next session. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for your time. Have a nice day.